You've just entered the Disaster Tough podcast, the place for emergency managers, first responders, and humanitarians who want to get the job done. Stories, lessons, and tips are provided by field experts. I'm your host, John Scardina, owner of Doberman Emergency Management and former federal emergency response official who's responded to some of the most extreme disasters. Disaster Tough is our mantra. It combines experience, training, and analytics in order to be successful at any stage within the disaster lifecycle. It means being a professional in emergency and disaster services. Doberman Emergency Management lives by this. If your organization needs to fill a gap, please contact us. We can help. Contact info is in the show notes. We also support other products and organizations that will increase your ability. For example, if you fight wildfires, hurricanes, a pandemic, any disaster in the field, at a hospital or command center, listen up. You're missing out if you do not use L3 Harris for your radio comms. They are secure, portable, mobile, and scalable, which is great news for us in the field. A truly disaster-tough radio system. Check out the XL family of radios by clicking on the show notes or simply go to l3harris.com. When you think of situational awareness, you need to think of Futurity IT. They are disaster tough because they saw a gap and figured out how to close it by creating the Orion and Athena applications. Situational awareness is all about speed, coordination, and accuracy of information. Futurity IT's Orion app collects and provides preliminary damage assessments and integrates all incident action plan documents with WebEOC. The Athena app allows for planning, contact tracing, and customizable group coordination in every single phase of the disaster lifecycle. The best part? Futurity IT made both applications extremely intuitive. It's so easy to use. Click on the show notes today to schedule a free demo. The show, everybody. It's your host, John Scardina. Of course, I'm so excited to be here this week. I get to talk to Kevin Pigg. Kevin Pigg is a great man for a couple of reasons. One, he really does know his stuff, and so we're going to be talking about that today. But like me, he's a mentor of the great Rodney Melsick, who's on this show. I think it was episode 6 a long time ago, so we got to get him back on. Rodney, of course, is the legend, so anybody who's trained by him, especially like Kevin, is going to be an expert in the field as well. So we're going to be talking about some of those experiences. Kevin also has a unique experience because he has local, state, and federal experience, so we can be talking about that today. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much. It's great to be here. Loving every minute of it. Let's get going.
That's right. Hey, first, I just want to say congratulations on the new job. You work at Essel Environmental now, that's right? That's right.
Yes.
So, we got to talk about that a little bit later in the show, but again, congrats on the new role. That's pretty exciting. So, let's talk about Rodney first. Rodney shared with me a story about Carson City, Nevada. He said that one of his favorite deployments he was ever on was writing the earthquake swarm plan, plan for their northern Nevada. So can you talk to us about that deployment? Was that your first touch in emergency management, or were you already involved in emergency management at that point?
Oh, well, this is a great story. So yeah, before that, I had gotten my degree in emergency management from North Texas. I went and worked at Florida and Putnam County Emergency Services. We got hit by Hurricane Gene and Francis, and was able to work in Fort Worth, Tarrant County Emergency Management. Did a lot of Katrina work. Worked on bioterrorism and a lot of planning. And I was really wanting to get an overall rounded experience in emergency management. And, I worked for FEMA and I decided, why not? And so I was kind of in between like Region 6 and I hadn't really chose a cadre yet. Mm. And I get this call from another great legend in emergency management, Ian Dixon. Mm. And he basically says, Rodney Melsick would like to talk to you. I'm like, Rodney Melsick? I don't know who Rodney Melsick is.
We've all been there. That's funny.
His last words, right?
Yeah.
And so, but he's like, hey, I saw your resume. Do you think you'd like to come out to Carson City? You've got a planning background, and we're looking for planners to kind of join our Region 9 group. And and at the time, it sounded exciting. So, usually you go to disasters, you get deployed to go to disasters. But when I joined Region 9, it was like my first deployment was Carson City, Nevada.
Mm.
And yeah, it was a concept of operations plan that we were working on. And it was a room full of a lot of subject matter experts, basically helping Nevada develop how to do centers of gravity and courses of action for earthquakes, and especially the Northeast region. And Rodney, he's a character, you know,
Yeah.
and out of the gate, I'm like writing my plans, like, oh yeah, I've written I've written MMRS planning, CM plans, and all that, comprehensive plans and functional plans and all that. So, I'm writing my stuff, and like the first day, Rodney's over here, and he's reading. He's like, "What? Who wrote this? What is this type of this writing you've got here? This isn't right. Oh, this is terrible." And I was like, and Ian was like, "No, that's pretty much just how Rodney talks." So Rodney really mentored me, and kept me by his side through FEMA planning. I was on Region 9, but I also assisted the IMET team. Back then, it was Marty Hickman. I don't know if you were familiar
No,
with
I
him.
don't know Marty. Yeah.
I would go up to them and go to do the IMAT assessment stuff. But Carson City was unique because we were deployed to write a plan and then exercise, and we worked from the hotel, and it was across the street from the casino, and so it was a really nice job. It was right next to Tahoe, so we drive out to Tahoe and everything. But we actually won the Secretary's Award for Team Excellence for that plan.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
From Mike Chertoff, and that's one of the things I was the most proud of, and we put together a good plan, and then we exercised it, and working with Rodney was just always an adventure.
Mm. Yeah, that's first of all, another congrats, right? Congrats on the award. That's a big honor too. So you should be proud of that, and for the work you did. And I love Rodney because, in fact, I was talking to Dr. Stephen Johnson on the show about it. Stephen Johnson calls him like a secret alpha. Like you start following him and his train of thought, and you don't even know you're really doing it for a little while, and you're just like, wait, everyone just starts to migrate towards Rodney, and he's a great leader because of that. And it shows like you already had a wealth of experience before you went in there. It also does highlight that you can be very, very good, and somebody else can be very, very good, and just be doing it differently. And what I find fascinating about that is, I mean, this speaks to probably why Rodney likes you so much, is because, Rodney was the leader. He was the planning section chief. And so an emergency manager talks about that learning point, right? An emergency manager has to be able to take what they can bring to the table, but also meld into the current operational tempo, right? So if he wants it one way, you got to work on that way, and be able to fight for what's right, but also, just to be a team player. So that's a great call out there too. So.
Well, the thing about Rodney is he says that stuff. If he likes you, he'll give you a hard time. And
Rodney stopped giving me a hard time a while ago, so that's a problem.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Well, that's probably because he works for you now. He's good.
Well, that's funny you bring that up because I didn't hire Rodney. Rodney informed me when he retired from FEMA that he was working with me. And that's how that conversation went. And of course, I was like, "Oh, of course, the guru." And he's like a funny guy, like you said. So beyond. So let's see, Carson City storm earthquake plan, right? Where did you go from there? Were you hired on? Were you like or did you stay in the cadre as a reservist? I know you eventually ended up in the state of Louisiana. But what was your kind of career path from there?
Right after that, right after that, I was sent to Baton Rouge. My next deployment was to work on the hurricane timeline
Mm.
that the governor's office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness was working in correlation with FEMA. And Gustav hit, and
Mm.
I accidentally managed the largest federal pet shelter in United States history. That's a
Whoa.
whole other story. I got sent up to go drop off uh, some scanning documents and the software, and I get up there and there's no one there, and there's a few Red Cross people, and I was like, well, they're coming. they're on the way. They're like right behind me. The evacuation is happening. And there was like no cots set up. There was
Oh my gosh.
no electricity, no wireless capabilities to scan people in, because the goal was to scan people in and badge them. And next thing I know, 4 days later, me, myself, and a few other FEMA employees, great people, ended up being like the operational managers of that shelter.
Whoa.
And it was just an insane experience. As a matter of fact, I'm writing an article about it right now. It's called "How I Accidentally Managed the Largest Federal Shelter in United States History."
That's a cool
And,
title
and
too. Yeah.
yeah, well, it'll be comical because it was very hard work. But after that, that was something I did for Mike Hall, who was the FCO. And after that, between him and Rodney, um, I just worked for them.
Mm.
When he saw me do that, and Rodney saw what I did I stayed in Region 9. I worked out of Oakland a bit, working on plans when I wasn't deployed. I ended up going to Washington, D.C., FEMA headquarters,
Mm.
when Bob Fenton was up there with Dan Stevens, who's a great guy, and worked in training, exercise, and doctrine. And then I actually got in a relationship with someone from Louisiana, and I couldn't be going all out and about, like I used to. 5 years of that, you're deployed, you're on the road, you're managing disaster after disaster after disaster. And so one thing I did was I bought a dog. I bought a little Jack Russell Terrier. I'm like, okay, I got to take care of this dog now, which means I got to find a job where I'm not always out in the field. So I got a job with the governor's office, and I started to go into public assistance and hazard mitigation. And that was giving me a different background, because now I was really getting into the grant management part of things. And before, I had done emergency operations centers and planning, and all the overall comprehensive emergency management things we have to do at the local level. But now I was at the state level working Katrina projects and Sewer and Water Board, New Orleans, Port of Orleans, and just these ridiculously difficult grant management issues that the state was still trying to overcome for Katrina. And it was a very valuable experience. And after that, I decided to join the private sector. I had gotten my local, state, and federal experience. I figured I was a comprehensive emergency manager, and it was time to get out there and see what I could do,
Yeah.
on this level.
That's your career path is both really fascinating. Actually, before I get into that, just for our listeners' sake, if you're like, oh wait, when's this article going to be posted? Kevin, if you send us your article, we'll post it on our LinkedIn page. The main page is Doberman Emergency Management Group, but we'll post that article on there and link it to you, so our listeners
Sure.
can read it. But in terms of your career path, it's really interesting in the beginning how you were like, oh, I wanted to pick a cadre. Like you had this idea, you wanted to have a plan. And I kind of had this same thing happen to me where I was like, okay, I was in DC, I was going to stay in DC. I had kind of like this plan. And then, I met Rodney, and it's like all kind of blew up. But a lot of these projects, it sounds like more or less it fell on your lap, right? You're at the right place at the right time. And
here's a question for you. I've had somebody ask me this question about my business, and so I'm going to pose the question to you. Do you believe that it was luck, or do you believe that it was skill that got you each of those opportunities?
I would say both. There is a right place, right time aspect of things. I always joke that, I don't follow disasters, they tend to follow me. Uh, Perfect example is when I went to Florida, we got hit with 3 hurricanes. And I said, okay, well, I'm move back to Texas, be closer to my family. I was like, well, so much for hurricanes. And then Katrina hit. Fort Worth got 25,000 people, medical evacuations. Next thing I know, I'm doing HURVAC again and an EOC, operations for mass sheltering. And I'm like, well, here we are again. And, what's funny is September 11th is what got me an internship with Region 6.
You and
So I
Brock
went from,
Long. What's up with you and Brock Long? Everywhere you go, there's like these disasters happen. That's what he says to you. Every time the guy goes anywhere, it's like, oh, this big disaster happened. He has to manage it. So
everywhere. That's what I say. They follow me. So, I think had Ian Dixon and Rodney not actually made a concerted effort to go find someone that had a background, I wouldn't have been where I was. They took the initiative to do that.
Mm.
But my resume had already been replete enough at the local level for them to see it and say, this is a guy we want on our team. And so they recruited me. And that was, right place, right time for the disasters to get the experience that I've gotten.
Cool.
Everything I've Sandy, Katrina, Rita, Gustav, just about everything, the 2004 hurricanes in Florida. And I was just like, I've always kind of been in that area. Sorry about that. So it's been an interesting ride that I think it's a little bit of both. I think, I was lucky they found me, but at the same time, I think I would have been able to make a difference, based off of my work ethic in FEMA. Rodney always used to say, what was it he said? He said, if I want a good emergency manager, sometimes I have to deploy 5 and get a good one. And once you get, a name for yourself and you show that you're able to work well with others, it kind of takes care of itself.
There's another person I like that statement a lot. I like all those statements, to be honest. And I agree with you. I think it's luck and opportunity. Patrick McGinn says something along the lines of, and I'm sure he's quoting it from somebody else. I don't think he tries to claim it as his own, but it's like those who are successful have done all the preparation so that when an opportunity does arise, they can hit it. Like they can do it, right? And so it sounds like that's exactly what you were doing. You were doing everything right. You were doing all the preparation. You were working hard. You were gaining that experience. And so when this opportunity arose, you were able to say, okay, I'm going to take it. Or 4 days later, managing the largest federal shelter in U.S. history. Like that's insane. I think that's the reason why. Oh man, I bring this up on almost every episode, but I got it. But Hurricane Harvey. Look at the difference between the response in Hurricane Harvey, largest hurricane response in U.S. history, largest hurricane in U.S. history, right? Category 4 hurricane sitting on a state for 4 days, that doesn't happen, right? Versus Hurricane Maria or Hurricane, forget the other one, the one that hit Florida. Those responses went very different. And the biggest difference of that is every single person on our team, well, there was 90% of our team had already had a ton of hurricane experience. And so we knew what we were doing. We understood the tempo. We worked well with the state, and it just grooved. And so when you had that high turnover rate, which sometimes happen on traveling all the time, you kind of lose that experience too. So that's kind of another training point. But man, you're talking about bringing up excellent points there. When I think of like hearing about Kevin Pigg, because I've heard a lot about Kevin Pigg, I especially from Rodney, because you're one of the favorites for sure. But I think of one of Rodney's one of his favorites, kind of the Rodney episode. We should probably get off of that, but we're not fanboys. But another Kevin Coleman.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's like Kevin Coleman, right? He's another one of those, and he and I it's kind of funny talking about working well together. I like our story because when we came on the team, we're polar opposites in terms of personality and how we operate, especially in-house. And then when we get deployed, we're both in go mode, and we both work really, really well together. And now he's a great friend of mine, and I have a ton of respect for him, and I hope he has that same thing for me. But it shows that, like, again, just do a ton of preparation, and so when the opportunity arises, you're able to go. So good call outs for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's switch the gears away from Rodney a little bit and talk about Kevin Pigg, and because we're dancing around this topic. So let's talk about your passions then. Why did you get in emergency management, and what's kind of fueling you now? What are you working on?
So basically, my dad's a firefighter. My stepdad was was a retired police officer, and I always had the want to actually be in fire at first.
Hmm.
And then September 11th happened, and I wanted to help people, and as I was getting my degree in emergency management, I took a class in terrorism, and it was a summer class, and we had an FBI agent, sit there and tell us, okay, so one thing that we know is our enemy number one is Osama bin Laden, and it's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when, and he's going to do something, and that's our big problem, is trying to figure out how to stop someone like that. And I remember that resonating with me. That was a class that took place in July. That was July 2001.
Whoa.
2 months later, the World Trade Center happened, and I woke up to it. And being in emergency management, knowing I wanted to do fire, it was basically like, okay, I'm going to call Region 6, because Denton is, where I went to school in North Texas, and that's where Region 6 is. So I was like, do y'all need any help? And they're like, could you come in and answer phones? And I'm like, yeah, that's a great thing to do. And so I got really immersed into emergency management at that point. And when I got to Florida, I was my first job. I had never even been to Florida before. Like, I'd never been to Disney World growing up, So I go out and interview for this job, and I get it. And I'm the emergency management coordinator, and I'm 23 years old, and I'm still young and probably a little too cocky, and headstrong. And I get out there, and I remember there was this high wind, and it came through, and we didn't know if it was a tornado or not. And so I went out there, and there was it was a rural county, and I just remember seeing this mobile home pretty much destroyed, and seeing this couple, having to deal with that. And they had their granddaughter with her, and she was like, she had like a wet, flooded Barbie doll, and she was trying to comb the water out of it. And I was like, well, this is my calling. I mean, it resonated with me so much that there's somebody out there that's trying to make a life, make a living for themselves. And then something like that can happen and just take something from them that they never expected. And that's always stayed inside of me. Anytime I forget about the difference we make, because sometimes we don't see the difference we make in emergency management. We're not pulling people out of houses, but with a pen, we might be saving thousands of lives, but we don't know. It's important to go back and see that, remember what you see when you see people. And that's why I'm in the field. I'm in the field to help people.
Perfect answer. The perfect answer. That has to be the takeaway from the show. I mean, we'll talk about other things, but I've said it once, I've said it 100 times. The best emergency managers are humanitarians at heart. You want to save life, property, and continuity of operations. Anything outside of that it's not emergency management. And like you clearly still have that passion, which is good. You know, you meet these guys who, you know, people who've sat in the armchair for long enough, and they kind of forget like how they're actually impacting people. They aren't just dots on a map. And
Right.
I think that's huge. Something kind of similar happened to me. I was working with a bunch of different nonprofits and and then the tsunami hit in 2011, and some people that I knew were impacted by that. And I was able to use my background and be able to speak Japanese and already helping with nonprofits to say like, hey, how can I help out with a disaster? I just want to help. And it kind of kicked over for me. And so although I had been already in college and I did this switch from economics to emergency management. It was like, I just want to help people for the rest of my life. And man, that's like the perfect answer. So good job on answering that.
Well, you know, one of the things that I mean, okay, so let's just take the planning section for example. Okay, so let's say a FEMA planning section team comes in, they're new. One of the things I would do as a planning section chief was I would make them go tour the damaged areas, because you can sit there and write an incident action plan all day and get lost in a ICS form 215.
Mm-hmm.
You know, trying to understand the tasks and get the product out and do situational awareness, spot reports, situation reports, GIS, oversight of, you know, operational capabilities, but not realize what you're doing it for. So
Yeah.
I would let each person in the section take like half a day, or we'd go out and look, this is what happened. Okay. This is what you're working towards. It's not an instant action plan you're working towards. You're working towards this. And from that is where the incident action plan comes from. So like, especially in like the tsunami, you talk about tsunami, we had an American Samoa tsunami, and just being able to go out and see the people and talk to the people and help, you know, clean up on the weekends free and stuff like that. And they took me in like family,
Mm.
you know, and it's important to be able to go out there and see that, because if, you know, like I said, with emergency management, we don't see things sometimes. If we're writing grants for recovery, we're doing reimbursement requests and working on a new amendment for a project worksheet, you know, you can get in the weeds on that and forget that happened because something was badly damaged and it affected somebody, you know, and so you have to try to keep that into perspective.
I was lucky because Rodney was probably had my back and I'd be able to go out and do like site surveys based on the GIS work we were doing. And so I'd go out there with a NOAA liaison, Dr. Mike Paddock, and we'd go out there and we would talk to the survivors, and we would look to see if our data, you know, in office was matching what was out in the field. And we'd get, you know, flood height calculations, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was extremely impactful for me to be able to actually talk to them and see their personal level of resiliency. People who lost everything, you know, people like the wildfires especially are just wild to go out there and just talk to people who's looking at this thing that they lived in, that they grew up in maybe, and it's just gone, just white ash. And I still remember I think it was the Southern California wildfires. I went out there with the drone for FEMA. It's when we were doing the proving of the program, and I could see on my screen for the drone, because I was looking at the drone, that there was an individual walking up behind, kind of like creepily walking up behind our SUV. And I was just like, "Hey, Kevin," or not, "Hey, Kevin, hey, Kyle, like there's a guy coming up here. Just be aware of that." And so Kyle, you know, immediately addresses the situation, and we have all of our FEMA gear and everything. And the guy was just like, "Why are you out here?" You know, and he was kind of puffed up a little bit. And we said, "Hey, we're here to make sure that we capture every single home that was destroyed, because we want to help people." And he was like, "Oh man, there's been so many photographers and news people out here, like they don't care about it at all." And he just, kind of just broke down, and he's just like,
Yeah.
"Thank you for helping us." And like that's why we get out there. That's why we go for months at a time, 7 days a week, 12, 14-hour minimum. We always say 12 hours, but it really turns into like 16, 18 hours a day. Like that's
Yeah.
why, because no matter how hard it gets for the emergency manager, the people in the field have it 10 times harder. And then,
Yeah.
if you get to help out like with like USAR, like telling USAR where to go, and you realize like, okay, there's people in neighborhood A and people in neighborhood B, and you just said go to B, that those people in A are going to be impacted. And so it does have
Right.
real life
Right.
consequences. I mean, I can talk about that all day, but yeah, great points.
Yeah. Well, you talk about disaster tough. Sometimes I feel like maybe I'm disaster soft as I get a little bit older, because it touches you after a while, and there's another thing that we, you're absolutely right. So when we get these individuals who are hurt, when we talk about disaster tough, a lot of the problems that's going on, we're even seeing it with COVID right now. One of the kind of the taboo things about it in emergency management that needs to be addressed more is mental health of the individuals, because what happens to them is they're very resilient at first,
Yeah.
because it happens and their adrenaline is pumping. It's the 4 months later when the house still isn't fixed, or the 2 years later when the facility hasn't even gotten a good scope of work written yet. They haven't even started construction. It's those things that can really weigh on not only the disaster survivors, but also, you say, people out in the field have it 1,000 times worse. They do. But, we have a problem with emergency management of trying to sustain healthy mentality amongst our workers who are working 12, 14, 16 hours a day consistently,
Yeah.
and trying to maintain. Look at what COVID's done to just our community with being, isolated, and some of the mental health issues that's coming. That's disaster related,
Absolutely.
and that's
Mental
very much
health is
part of it.
Yeah, mental health is part of disaster management, 100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things that's another thing I'm real passionate about is, trying to identify that and come up with ways to combat it. And it's a part of our field that I think is undervalued, and I think that a lot of people are starting to value it more. You're seeing it pop up, topics all over, and that's one of the things I'm going to be talking about a little more in the future as well.
Good.
So stay tuned.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll bring it back on to talk about that specifically. We have talked about that on probably 80% of our shows, because anybody who comes on here with real experience knows that that's so important. And we've all had those moments. I've talked about my personal moments of like, oh, like it's time to like really do that after action review, and just like to talk to you can't really talk to everybody about it, but people don't really understand it, and everybody processes it differently. But just be able to like sit around the table or go get some food with some people who like really know what it's like. Joe Hernandez
Right.
talked a lot about that on our show. I think it was the second time he came on the show, where he talked about all these different, because he does urban search and rescue, the medical side. And so he's sharing these really intense experiences. And so I said, how do you process it? And so I would encourage people to go check out that episode to hear from Joe. But let's have you back on the show
Yeah.
too. Just do like this thing, we're just like to promote it, because yeah, you're right. People get burned out. They do have the survivor has a 1,000 times worse. They really do. And all
Right.
that. But the emergency manager, anybody who does a high stress job, you got to learn how to like be able to process that and then to work with it.
You have to be built for it. Yeah, you have to kind of be built for it. It's not for everybody, and that is not a strength or a weakness. It's a matter of what your resiliency is over time, and being able to manage that. I tell people sometimes, before Hurricane Katrina, I had a girlfriend and a best friend. After Hurricane Katrina, I had broken up with her and had lost touch with my best friend. They didn't understand what was going on. Kevin just disappeared, for like 4 months, and no, I'll call you back. I don't have time. I mean,
Yeah.
it was, and those are the things. Yeah, what we would, don't want to tell you how to run your show or anything, but I'd love to be back to talk about that, maybe with a few other emergency managers.
I would love to do it. Yeah.
We could just do like a special on that.
That'd be awesome. We got to keep it, we got to keep it positive. What happens with me is I end up going down the rabbit hole. I've cut out probably 4 or 5 hours of just rabbit hole stuff that I've talked about on the show. But that's what being, you say disaster soft. I think that's funny. I think that is being disaster tough, because in my mind, resiliency is a broken word in our vocabulary. If you look at the word resiliency, and I still use it, and I'm kind of at fault for this too, but resiliency is all about being able to bounce back. Well, I don't want to have to bounce back. I want to do everything. You're talking about that preparation versus opportunity. I want to do absolutely everything I can to punch that hurricane in the face and say I'm fine. And like, it's only a disaster until it impacts people. And so that includes mental health. If you know you're going to be in a high stress environment, and I agree with you kind of have to be built for it a little bit, especially the long term stuff. But you have to be able to also say, like, okay, I know how my body reacts to this, even if my mental is fine. Like, all of a sudden you're feeling overly exhausted for no reason, right? Like, you start to go through these processes, and as you understand them and you can address them in real time, then you don't find yourself homeless in 5 years, not being able to process, right? You're able to function normally. So
you have to learn how to let it go. You try not to take it home with you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's so much reward to it. It's a high stress job. We do it what we do because I don't know anybody that's been in emergency management for a long time that does, like, man, I really don't like this. You gotta like what you do in emergency management, because it's a niche group of individuals. We all know each other, or we know each other's names, and we're all out there trying to do the same thing. And you got to learn to be able to cope with it, and come up with some functions. But it's one of the most rewarding things you can do, is take on those challenges and learn how to overcome them yourself while you're helping other people. It's a real challenge, but it's very rewarding field to be in. It really is.
Every episode we have a quote of the week. That's the quote of the week. It's challenging.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, so you just figured it out. Like every episode we try to find this power statement. You've already had several of those, and we're going to make a clip based off of like that health humanitarian thing. But like the challenge versus the reward, that's it. Like that's the quote. And like it talked about a mic drop moment from Kevin Pigg there, but yeah, mic drop because it's podcast too, right? So pun there.
Nice to see y'all. I'm going to turn this off now.
Bye. Yeah. So we do like to ask one really important. Well, actually, I'm going to ask 2 questions. The first question is because I prefaced this at the beginning of the show. Essel Environmental, your new role. You're building out these capabilities there. For our listeners' sake, of like, okay, this guy has all this experience. Why did he go to the private sector? We can talk about that later. Tell us about Essel Environmental.
Yeah, so basically, what I'm doing is I'm basically the emergency management director for Essel Environmental. They are the 3rd largest growing company in the Northern California Bay Area, and it's been a difficult wildfire season. The last half decade has really affected Northern California and California in the areas, and Nick, the owner, he was able to help learn wildfire response capabilities that were necessary for our environmental factors. And as that began to grow, he saw the need for, an expansion, to take on a more comprehensive emergency management approach to the response capabilities that they've been doing.
Hmm.
And so he contacted me, and we had a lot of good discussions. And it just seemed like we were on the same page about growing an emergency management capability model.
That's awesome.
What we want to do is grow comprehensive emergency managers that are cross-trained in uh, multifaceted capabilities, and allow those people to be able to be available, um, to go out and serve in multiple capabilities. And they will be specialized in certain ways, but for the most part, we want to be able to go out and say, okay, how can we improve with new technologies? How can we give back to the field of emergency management through offering some, training and capabilities of our personnel,
Hmm.
continue to grow our environmental capabilities in the disaster field, because it's such a almost an unspoken, field of emergency management, the environmental aspect of things, and being able to go out and ensure, certain safety protocols, and all the different types of sampling and testing that goes on, throughout the different types of disasters that occur. And it decided it was time to kind of to grow the company, and start to provide the care for not only to continue operations in the areas we've already worked, which has been Deepwater Horizon, and the California wildfires, and but also start to ramp up for hurricane season and offer those capabilities as well. So it's going to be an exciting venture, to be able to get out there with other individuals, other folks that want to collaborate, want to help, uh, the individuals who need it the most, while we try to identify, you know, how we can move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I because of your new role, and I got kind of turned towards Ethel there a little bit, and I don't know how. Even emergency managers. I don't know how many people realize that every single disaster is an environmental and a hazmat disaster. Like you have to
Right.
deal with those materials that get destroyed in people's homes or buildings or whatever, and so it's a natural fit for Essel to say, hey, we're already going out to these disasters to help out with this piece. Let's bring on an expert like Kevin and just start building out some of those pieces. And so, like, I'm one of those guys. People are like, wait, don't you own Doberman? I'm like, yeah, of course I own Doberman, but I love working with Essel and bringing on other people from the parts, because like I really want to build up this one team, one fight mentality, and I'm sick of people being impacted by disaster, right? And so if we can work together and we can pull in different resources, and you guys are doing, damage assessments and hazmat stuff, and you're putting people, out there, and another company comes in and they do like that mitigation piece, and another company, like, you're talking about doing a comprehensive things in house, and of course you should be able to have that capability, but it's really smart for everybody in the field to want to work together, because we want people to stop being impacted by disasters. So
Right.
I applaud you again on joining Essel. Too bad Doberman didn't pick you up first, but it's we're excited for you.
Thank you. It's great.
Of course. So the last question I like to ask people before we get you off of here is, with all your experience working with all the different levels of government and now in the private sector, if you were going to look at the future emergency manager, if you were going to change one thing about emergency management for the future, what is one thing you would like to switch over?
Well, that's a very interesting question. You talking about one thing to improve upon, or one thing you'd like to see change for the future? Or
Yeah. If you're just going to do something different in our field, what would it be?
oh, if we were gonna do something different.
Well,
in
if you're
our
going to talk
field.
to the future emergency manager, you want the future emergency manager to do something different than we're doing now. What is one change or one improvement you'd like to see in the field?
Oh, it's always communications.
The standard AAR. Okay, so I ask you, if you say communication, do you mean coordination or do you mean equipment?
I mean, yes.
Good answer. Yeah, that's the right
You
answer.
know, we need to be able to share our information correctly and make sure that we're all on the same page. And we've been doing that, and it's gotten a lot better. But to continue to find the means of communication, effective collaboration, uh, and you know, you have to leave your ego at the door in emergency management. You have to check your ego at the door. As a matter of fact, I used to have a sign that said that at an emergency operations center. Check your ego at the
That's hard
at the
for A-type
door.
personalities, man. It's hard for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, there's pride in what we do, but we have to understand that in the emergency management field, knowledge is power, but not in the sense that I have the knowledge, so I have the power.
Mm.
If
Good call
created,
out. Right call out. Yeah.
if we're going to do like you say, one team, or as they say on the LSU football team, go Tigers, one heartbeat.
Mm.
And that's kind of what we need to continue to do, is work on our communications constantly. A lot of that has to do with training as well. We like to do create our procedures and then exercise them without training them. That's an effective communication tool. I'd love to see more training implemented in emergency management. A lot of people think of exercises as good training, and it is. But I would like to see individuals, continue their training, continue to educate themselves, and continue to learn the coordination and communication skills that sometimes have hurt operations because lack thereof.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're hitting all pistons there. For a guy who communicates for a living, right? This podcast, I'm definitely a big fan of communications. And interestingly enough, two of our sponsors, one does the software, Futurity IT does software for coordination for all the emergency management groups. Another one actually provides the radios and the LMR technologies to be able to transfer between radio and cell phones in the field. And so, between the coordination and between the actual hardware, again, totally agree with you on that. And I think that's a great call out. And I will take a big deep breath when one day I don't see communication on an AAR. When that happens, I'll be like, okay, we're really improving here. So good call out. Hey, Kevin, just want to say, as we're wrapping up here, thanks again for coming on our show. We got to get you back on to talk about mental health and to maybe even get other people on here with you to talk about that. I love that idea. So we can have like a group conversation with that. And again, congratulations at your new role with Ethel.
Oh, thank you very much. It was great to talk to you. I know you're having a good time. I've been enjoying the podcast. I'm really proud of what you've been able to accomplish. And I think, everything looks like it's going in the right direction in our field, and continue to keep up the hard work. And it's been such a pleasure and an honor to be able to work with some of the gracious and wonderful people that I've ever met in my life. Rodney being one of them, and of course, a lot of individuals over the years. I had so many names in emergency management. I wish I could, thank, but I know the award show music's about to start playing, so they're going to rush me off stage. I just want to say thanks as well. Oh, and also, we were talking the other day, and you mentioned disaster movies. I'll tell you the best disaster movie for emergency management, it's got to be Volcano.
Oh, that's a good
Because
movie.
with Tommy Lee Jones is an actual emergency manager, and he's the superhero of the movie. So to me, that's the official emergency management movie, because it's the one where the hero is an actual emergency manager.
It's in Chicago, right? And they blow up I'm gonna spoiler alert, but it's like 20 years. It's where they blow up the building to change the flow of the lava, right?
Yeah, they
man,
have
that's
to.
a good movie. Yeah. Interestingly enough, Shin Godzilla that came out in 2016. That's another really great. Anyways, we can talk about that forever. Hey, you are the type of caliber of person you're talking about. You are that person. I have a ton of respect for you, and I'm glad you came on the show. I am gonna cut my own stuff off by starting this music here, but hey, if you like Kevin's episode, you appreciate what he had to say, which you should, because it's a great episode. You should give us that 5-star rating and subscribe, of course. It also helps us be able to get great guests like Kevin back on the show. So we do it weekly. Our main social media page, of course, is Disaster Tough Podcast on Instagram. We also post on LinkedIn and Facebook, so you can check us out there. If you want to work with Doberman Emergency Management or reach out for us for questions with follow-up for Kevin, you can email us at info@dobermanemg.com. Or what we really want people to start doing, everyone sends me all these emails, which we do love, but what we want people to start doing is go to our Instagram, again, Disaster Tough Podcast, and put your questions for Kevin on there so he can respond directly. And, we could just build this thing up. So check us all those things out, and we'll see you next week.